Imagine this. You're the most powerful man in the world. You rule an empire that stretches from Britain to Egypt. Millions of people bow before you. Yet every night you lie awake wondering if the very men sworn to protect you are planning your murder. This wasn't paranoia. This was the reality of being a Roman emperor. Because standing just outside your door were the Praetorian Guard. These weren't just bodyguards. They were Rome's elite soldiers, hand-picked warriors who could make or break an empire with a single decision. They were supposed to be your shield against assassination, but more often than not, they were the ones holding the knife. Think of them as the Secret Service, Navy SEALs, and a military coup all rolled into one terrifying package. Welcome back to Ancient Rome Revisited. I'm your host, Marcus Aurelius, and thankfully, I was one of Rome's emperors who wasn't stabbed to death by the Praetorian Guard. Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible story of the Praetorian Guard, how they evolved from loyal protectors into the ultimate kingmakers of ancient Rome. We'll explore who these elite soldiers really were, how they were selected and trained, their relationship with the emperors they served, and the shocking betrayals that would make Game of Thrones look like a children's bedtime story. By the end of this video, you'll understand why their name has become synonymous with treachery and political intrigue, and how they literally held the fate of the ancient world in their hands. Before we begin, though, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, then please do so now. That way you'll never miss another episode of Ancient Rome Revisited. If you've just clicked the subscribe button, then I, Marcus Aurelius, thank you. Origins and early history of the Praetorian Guard. To understand the Praetorian Guard, we need to go back to the Roman Republic, long before there were any emperors to protect. The word Praetorian comes from praetor, which in ancient Rome referred to high-ranking military commanders. These commanders needed protection, so they created special units of elite soldiers called cohors praetoria, essentially their personal bodyguards. Now imagine being a Roman general in the 2nd century BC. You're leading campaigns in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies who would love nothing more than to put a spear through your back. You'd want the absolute best soldiers protecting you, right? That's exactly what these early Praetorian cohorts were. Hand-picked veterans who had proven themselves in battle time and time again. During the chaotic final years of the Roman Republic, famous leaders like Mark Antony and Scipio Africanus had their own Praetorian units. These weren't just random soldiers. They were the ancient equivalent of special forces, the elite of the elite. But here's where things get interesting. When Octavian, who would later become Emperor Augustus, was fighting for control of Rome, he realized something crucial. If he was going to rule this massive empire, he'd need a permanent, professional bodyguard unit, not just for military campaigns, but for everyday protection in the heart of Rome itself. So in 27 BC, Augustus did something that would change Roman history forever. He created the first permanent Praetorian Guard. He established 9 cohorts, each containing between 500 to 1,000 men, and stationed them around Rome. This wasn't just about personal protection anymore. Augustus was creating an elite force that would serve as both imperial bodyguards and the emperor's personal enforcers. Selection and requirements for becoming a Praetorian Guard. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly did someone become a Praetorian Guard? It wasn't like filling out an application on LinkedIn. The selection process was incredibly rigorous, and the requirements were strict enough to make modern military special forces look like a casual weekend hobby. First off, You had to be an elite soldier in the Imperial Army. We're talking about veterans who had already proven themselves in combat, not fresh recruits who had never seen a battlefield. These men had survived campaigns in Germania, Gaul, or the eastern provinces. They were battle-tested warriors who knew how to kill efficiently and stay alive while doing it. But military skill wasn't enough. You also had to pass what we might call a citizenship test today. Praetorian Guards were required to be from Italy or from sufficiently Romanized parts of the empire. Think of it as Rome's version of a background check. They wanted men who were culturally Roman, who understood Roman values, and who had a vested interest in the empire's success. They couldn't risk having foreigners with divided loyalties standing next to the emperor with weapons. The guard also had to be physically impressive. These weren't just skilled fighters, they were the emperor's public face. When people saw the Praetorian Guard, they needed to think, now those are some serious soldiers. They had to look the part, tall, strong, disciplined, and intimidating enough to make potential assassins think twice. But here's what made them truly special. They were paid significantly more than regular legionaries. A Praetorian Guard could earn up to 3 times the salary of a standard Roman soldier. In today's terms, if a regular soldier was making $50,000 a year, a Praetorian was pulling in $150,000. Plus, they got bonuses from emperors, better equipment, and shorter service terms. It was like being a combination of Navy SEAL and investment banker. Dangerous work, but with premium compensation, military training, and special skills. Once selected, these men underwent training that would make modern military boot camps look like summer camp. The Praetorian Guard wasn't just about being tough. They had to master a diverse set of skills that went far beyond basic combat. First, there was the obvious stuff: swordsmanship, spear fighting, and hand-to-hand combat. But Praetorians had to be proficient with every weapon in the Roman arsenal. They trained with the gladius, the short Roman sword, the pilum, javelin, daggers, and even exotic weapons they might encounter from enemies across the empire. They were basically the Swiss Army knife of ancient warriors. But physical combat was just the beginning. These men had to be skilled in what we'd call executive protection today. They learned to read crowds, identify potential threats, and coordinate security in complex urban environments. Remember, Rome was a city of over 1 million people. Imagine trying to keep the president safe in ancient New York City, but with no radios, no surveillance cameras, and no bulletproof glass. The Guard also received training in interrogation techniques, investigation methods, and what we might call intelligence gathering. They weren't just bodyguards. They were the emperor's eyes and ears throughout the empire. If there was a conspiracy brewing, if senators were plotting, if there were rumors of rebellion in the provinces, the Praetorian Guard was expected to know about it. Perhaps most importantly, they had to maintain peak physical condition at all times. Unlike regular soldiers who might have downtime between campaigns, Praetorians were on duty 24/7. They had to be ready to fight at a moment's notice, whether that meant defending the emperor from an assassin's blade or putting down a riot in the streets of Rome. The Praetorian Guard's relationship with emperors. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. The relationship between the Praetorian Guard and the emperors they served was complicated, to put it mildly. On paper, they were loyal protectors, sworn to defend the emperor with their lives. In reality, they were like having a pack of wolves as pets, incredibly powerful allies, but with the constant potential to turn on you. For most emperors, the Praetorian Guard was both their greatest asset and their greatest threat. Think about it from the emperor's perspective. You need these men to survive, but they're also the people most capable of killing you. They have access to you at all times. They know your routines. They're armed and trained, and they have the loyalty of some of the most dangerous men in the empire. The smart emperors like Augustus and Trajan understood this dynamic. They kept the guard happy with generous bonuses, respected their traditions, and made sure never to appear weak or incompetent in front of them. Augustus was particularly clever. He appointed 2 equestrian prefects to command the guard, ensuring that no single person could control all that military power, but other emperors weren't so wise. Take Caligula, for example. This guy was notorious for his cruelty and erratic behavior. He humiliated senators, declared himself a god, and basically acted like a paranoid dictator with unlimited power. The problem was, the Praetorian Guard had to watch all of this up close. They saw his madness, his cruelty, his incompetence, and eventually they decided they'd had enough. The relationship worked both ways, though. Emperors who treated the guard well could count on incredible loyalty. When Emperor Claudius was proclaimed emperor after Caligula's assassination, it was the Praetorian Guard who found him hiding behind a curtain in the palace and essentially forced him to accept the throne. They became his kingmakers, demonstrating that their power went far beyond just personal protection. Major betrayals and assassinations. And now we come to the part of the story that would make even the script writers of House of Cards jealous. The betrayals. The Praetorian Guard didn't just protect emperors. They became the ultimate arbiters of who lived and who died in the Roman Empire. Let's start with their most famous victim, Emperor Caligula. By 41 AD, Caligula had become so unpredictable and cruel that even his own bodyguards couldn't stand him anymore. The conspiracy was led by Cassius Chaerea, a tribune of the Praetorian Guard who had been personally humiliated by Caligula multiple times. On January 24th, 41 AD, while Caligula was attending the Palatine Games, Chaerea and his fellow conspirators struck. They didn't just kill Caligula, they butchered him. According to historical accounts, they stabbed him 30 times, then went on to murder his wife and infant daughter to eliminate any potential heirs. It was brutal, efficient, and sent a clear message. Not even the emperor was safe from the Praetorian Guard. But Caligula was just the beginning. The Guard went on to assassinate Emperor Galba, who had the audacity to refuse them a bonus. They killed Emperor Pertinax after he tried to discipline them. They murdered Emperor Commodus, who had become increasingly paranoid and unstable. The list goes on and on. Historians count at least 13 emperors who were killed by the very men sworn to protect them. The most shocking part? Sometimes they'd kill an emperor and then immediately install his replacement. After murdering Caligula, they found his uncle Claudius cowering in the palace and proclaimed him emperor on the spot. It was like being fired and having your replacement chosen by the same people who just threw you out the window. Emperor Commodus provides another perfect example of their power. This guy was a real piece of work. He thought he was the reincarnation of Hercules, fought as a gladiator for entertainment, and renamed Rome after himself. When his behavior became too erratic, even for Roman standards, the Praetorian Guard orchestrated his assassination. They didn't just kill him, they erased him from history, removing his name from inscriptions and declaring him a public enemy. The Guard's betrayals weren't always about personal grievances either. Sometimes they were coldly political. When they felt an emperor was weak, ineffective, or bad for the empire, they'd simply remove him and install someone better. They became the ultimate power brokers, capable of making or breaking emperors based on their own judgment of what was best for Rome. Downfall of the Praetorian Guard. But as with all stories of unchecked power, the Praetorian Guard's reign of terror eventually came to an end. In the early 4th century AD, they made a fatal mistake that would cost them everything. During the chaotic period when multiple claimants were fighting for control of the empire, the Praetorian Guard threw their support behind Maxentius, who was challenging the authority of Constantine. This seemed like a safe bet. After all, they'd been kingmakers for centuries. Why should this time be any different? Well, it was different, because Constantine was different. On October 28th, 312 AD, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge outside Rome, Constantine's forces completely destroyed Maxentius's army. The Praetorian Guard, who had been the backbone of Maxentius's military power, found themselves on the wrong side of history. Constantine wasn't just another emperor who would accept their power games. He was a revolutionary who was transforming the entire empire. After his victory, he made a decision that would end nearly 300 years of Praetorian supremacy. He disbanded the Guard entirely. It wasn't just a military decision, it was a symbolic one. Constantine scattered the surviving Praetorians across the empire, stripping them of their special status, their elite pay, and their political power. The Praetorian Guard, the kingmakers of Rome, were finished. In their place, Constantine created new units, the Scholae Palatinae, that were directly loyal to him and stationed in his new capital of Constantinople. These new guards didn't have the political power or independence of the old Praetorian Guard. They were professional soldiers, nothing more. The lasting legacy of the Praetorian Guard. So what can we learn from the rise and fall of the Praetorian Guard? Their story is a masterclass in how power corrupts, and how even the most elite institutions can become threats to the very thing they're supposed to protect. For almost 300 years, the Praetorian Guard was the ultimate symbol of military excellence and political power. They were elite soldiers, perfectly trained, generously compensated, and entrusted with the most important job in the empire: protecting the emperor. But that trust and power ultimately corrupted them, turning them from protectors into predators. Their legacy lives on in our modern language. When we talk about a Praetorian mentality, we're referring to the dangerous combination of military power and political ambition. We see echoes of their story in every military coup, every palace guard that turns against their ruler, every elite unit that decides they know better than their civilian leadership. The Praetorian Guard's story is also a reminder of how fragile political power really is. These emperors commanded vast armies, ruled millions of people, and had seemingly unlimited authority. But they were still vulnerable to the men who stood closest to them. In a world where political power often depends on military support, the Praetorian Guard showed just how dangerous it can be when soldiers become politicians. Today, when we see news about military coups or palace intrigue, we're witnessing the same dynamics that played out in ancient Rome. The Praetorian Guard may be gone, but their story continues to repeat itself wherever military power intersects with political authority. The next time you hear about elite military units or personal security details, remember the Praetorian Guard. They were the best of the best, sworn to protect and serve. But they became the greatest threat to the very empire they were meant to defend. Their story is a timeless reminder that power without accountability is power that will eventually be abused, and that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from your enemies, but from those you trust most. That's the legacy of the Praetorian Guard, Rome's most elite soldiers and Rome's most dangerous traitors. They protected emperors, and they killed emperors, They preserved the empire, and they nearly destroyed it. They were the ultimate warriors, and the ultimate cautionary tale about what happens when the Guardians decide they want to be the rulers. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about life in ancient Rome, then please subscribe to this channel now, and you won't miss another episode of Ancient Rome Revisited. If you've just subscribed, then Marcus Aurelius. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.